Before the show starts, drop a comment below with where you're watching from, then sit back, relax, and get ready for some chilling stories. I moved into the house in early spring. It was a little too quiet for most people, but that's exactly why I picked it. A one-story rental tucked away on the edge of a forest in northern Pennsylvania, where you could go days without hearing a car pass by. After the chaos of the last year, divorce, job stress, and my mom's health scare, I just needed silence. The kind of silence that wraps around you and doesn't let go. The house itself was old, with creaky floors and doors that didn't close all the way, but it had a certain charm. Wide windows, a big wooden deck, and a small staircase that led up to a weird little attic, more like a finished crawl space, really. I wasn't even planning to use it until I found the binoculars. They were mounted on a tripod, positioned perfectly at the attic's front window. The weird part? The tripod legs were bolted into the wooden floor, like someone didn't want them moved. And the binoculars, vintage, heavy, and sharp as hell, were aimed at one specific point in the dense forest behind the house. Not just the forest in general, but one exact spot, between two narrow trees maybe 60 feet apart. I didn't think much of it at first. Just assumed the last tenant was a bird watcher or a hunter. But on the fourth evening, I climbed up to the attic out of boredom and looked through them. There was someone standing there. Not walking, not moving, just standing deep in the woods between the two trees. They were too far to make out details. No face, no clothes I could describe, just a dark shape with human posture. I blinked and looked again. Still there. I went downstairs, stepped out onto the back deck, and scanned the woods with my own eyes. Nothing. No one. Just shadows and pines. I laughed it off. Told myself it was probably a trick of the light or even some old log that looked like a person. But the next day, around the same time, I checked again. Same spot. Same figure. Still standing. This became a pattern. Every evening, just before sunset, I'd go up and look. And every evening, they'd be there. Always in the exact same position. Like a scarecrow, but with too much intention. I thought about walking into the woods to see what it was, but something about that idea made my chest tighten. I didn't want to go in there. Not alone. After a week, I tried to ignore it. Stopped going up to the attic. Focused on my remote work, took long walks during the day, kept the TV on more often just to fill the silence. But then things started happening. One night, I heard leaves crunching outside. It wasn't windy. It wasn't an animal. The steps were deliberate, measured. I turned off the lights and peeked through the window, but couldn't see anything. Still, I didn't sleep. The following night, I heard it again. This time closer. And the night after that, even closer, like someone circling the house. I finally called the police. A deputy showed up the next morning, gave me the usual speech about rural properties and wildlife. He even checked the woods with me, but we didn't find anything. No tracks, no signs of trespassing. When I asked about the binoculars in the attic, he just raised his eyebrows and said, "That's not standard issue surveillance, buddy. Maybe the last guy was just real into squirrels." Funny, but it didn't feel funny. That night, I went back up to the attic. The binoculars were still there, but the forest was empty. No one between the trees. I actually felt a little relief, until I looked down and noticed something was off. The tripod was no longer bolted to the floor. The bolts that used to hold the tripod in place were now scattered on the floor, like someone had unscrewed them carefully and left them there on purpose. I hadn't touched them. I was sure of it, and it wasn't like the vibration from walking around the attic would have loosened those thick, rusted bolts. No way. I stared at the binoculars for a long time. I didn't want to look through them again, but curiosity, it's like a sickness. I stepped closer, slowly brought them up to my eyes, and scanned the forest. Still empty. That was somehow worse. Over the next few days, the figure didn't return. The sound stopped too. No footsteps. No creaks. Nothing. You'd think I'd be relieved, but it was the kind of quiet that feels intentional. Like a pause in a conversation where the other person is waiting for you to say something stupid. Then, for days later, something changed. It was around 2 a.m. I was working late, coding in the kitchen with some music on low, when I felt a shift in the air. I don't know how else to explain it. Like the pressure in the room dipped. I turned the music off and just listened. That's when I heard it, a soft dragging sound coming from above me. The attic. At first, I froze. I genuinely couldn't move. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, my breath locked in my throat. Then I slowly stood up and grabbed the flashlight I kept by the back door. I didn't even bother calling the cops again. I knew how that would go. The ladder to the attic was already pulled down, which I didn't remember doing. My hand trembled as I climbed each step. The air got colder the higher I went. I flicked the flashlight beam around the room. Empty, except for the tripod, now lying on its side. And in its place, where it used to be mounted, there was something scratched into the wooden floor. I got closer, heart racing. It was a circle. No, not just a circle, a perfectly carved ring, maybe 3 feet across, with a smaller ring inside it and 4 symmetrical symbols spaced along the edge. Symbols I didn't recognize. Sharp, geometric, almost mathematical. This wasn't a prank. This wasn't vandalism. This had been carved from the inside. From someone who had spent a lot of time in that room. I couldn't sleep after that, not even during the day. My brain kept going back to the binoculars, to what they were really watching. What if I wasn't the one observing? What if they were a tool for something else to look in? The final straw came 3 nights later. I was in bed, staring at the ceiling, when I heard the sound. A single hollow knock. Not from the front door. Not from the back door. From the attic floor. Directly above my bed. That was it. I left everything. Laptop, clothes, groceries in the fridge. Got in my car and drove 3 hours south, straight to a cheap motel near my old campus. I didn't even tell the landlord. Just vanished. 2 weeks passed. I finally started breathing again. Started sleeping through the night. Until last Wednesday. I checked into a new apartment, modern, no attic, no woods. Safe. Or so I thought. I'd just gotten back from the grocery store when I noticed a package leaning against my door. No name. No return address. No stamps. Just a small box. Inside it, a single vintage binocular lens. And a sticky note. 3 words, scrawled in perfect block letters. Now we see. It was supposed to be the reset we both needed. After back-to-back burnouts and a breakup that nearly broke me in half, I was desperate to get away. Somewhere with no notifications, no schedules, no one asking me for anything. Just me and Rachel, my best friend since college, a hammock, and a view. Rachel found the place online. A private eco-retreat in the Mexican countryside, tucked between hills and jungle. The photos were gorgeous. Wide-open cabins, solar lighting, wooden footpaths, fresh meals made with ingredients grown on-site. No Wi-Fi, limited cell service, sold as a digital detox. The price was almost too good to be true. $85 for 4 nights. Introductory rate, the listing said. We laughed it off, booked it, and packed our bags. The drive from the airport was long. A man in a beige SUV picked us up, silent the entire way. His name tag just said Victor. No small talk. Just winding dirt roads, patches of forest that looked like they hadn't been touched in decades, and finally, a tall iron gate with wooden walls on either side. Inside, the retreat looked like the photos, but somehow colder, less curated. The trees felt close. Too close. And there were no other guests around, at least none we saw that first day. Still, we were shown to our cabin, handed a printed schedule of activities, and reminded by the staff multiple times not to leave the property without an escort. Why would we leave? Rachel joked. There's nothing out there but trees. We settled in. The food was bland but fresh. The beds were hard but clean. At night, the sounds of the forest were constant, buzzing, chirping, crunching. It was a little eerie, but we chalked it up to being city girls too used to sirens and streetlights. The second night, we met another guest. Her name was Lena. She'd been there for a week already and looked tired. Not just physically, but emotionally wrung out. Pale, withdrawn, jumpy. I'd leave if I could, she whispered to me when Rachel went to grab dessert. They don't let you leave early. Don't ask questions. Just do what they say. I laughed, thinking it was a joke. But she didn't laugh back. The next morning, Lena was gone. We asked the staff about her. Who? They responded with blank stares. No one by that name was checked in here. Rachel pushed a little harder, asking if maybe Lena had transferred to another cabin or left early. "There is no Lena," one of the women said, in perfect English, but with zero emotion. "Perhaps you were dreaming." Dreaming? That's when I started noticing the cameras. Tiny ones, tucked into corners. One inside the ceiling beam of our cabin. Another in the corner of the yoga platform. One even embedded in the soil beside the meditation path. I pointed them out to Rachel, but she just shrugged. Every place has cameras these days. It's for safety. But who are they protecting? That night, I woke up to the sound of our door unlocking. Not knocking, unlocking. I held my breath, staring at the doorknob, waiting for it to turn. It didn't. But when I got up to check, there was a slip of paper on the floor just inside the room. Silent hour means silence. No signature. No handwriting I recognized. I turned to Rachel, already awake, her eyes wide. She saw it too. Neither of us slept after that. We just laid there, waiting for the sun to come up, trying to convince ourselves we were overreacting. Maybe it was some strict rule about quiet hours we hadn't fully understood. Maybe they were just weird about discipline out here. But deep down, we both knew that note wasn't about keeping peace. The next morning, we tried to act normal. We followed the schedule, joined a stretching class, drank some awful herbal tea, sat in a silent group session where no one made eye contact. The staff watched everything, every movement, every choice. It wasn't just structure anymore, it was surveillance. That afternoon, I pulled Rachel aside and told her we needed to leave. She agreed immediately. The tension had been building for days, and that note, it pushed us over the edge. We packed fast and quiet, left our bags light so we could move fast. There was no cell signal, and the landline at reception was always out of service. We didn't have a car, and Victor, the driver, was nowhere to be found. We figured we'd just start walking down the road until we found someone. Except the front gate was gone. I don't mean it was locked. I mean it was physically gone. The same heavy gate we drove through days earlier was now just a stretch of wooden fence, sealed shut and surrounded by a wall that didn't look like it could be climbed. Barbed wire coiled along the top like it had always been there. Like it had never not been there. Rachel looked at me. "Was this here before?" "No," I said immediately. "No way." That night, we didn't sleep in the cabin. We hid in a supply shed near the back of the property, using a rusted shovel to pry the lock open. We barely fit, but it was away from the cameras and hopefully from whoever kept opening our door. Around 3 a.m., we heard footsteps, slow, even heavy. They passed by the shed and then stopped. Right outside. We held our breath. I could hear Rachel shaking next to me, trying not to make a sound. Whoever it was didn't knock. Didn't try to come in. Just stood there. For minutes. Then, the sound of something being dragged, metal against dirt. I don't know what it was, and I didn't want to look. The next morning, we found a section of the outer fence near the jungle side that had loose panels. It looked intentional, like someone had pried the boards loose just enough to make a gap, then covered it back up to hide it. We didn't wait. We ran. Through mud, vines, insects biting every exposed inch of our skin. We ran until we hit a dirt road, then followed it for nearly 3 miles before we reached a gas station. I could barely form words when I tried to explain to the clerk what had happened. He looked confused, said he'd never heard of that retreat, said there weren't any properties like that around there, just farms and abandoned land. We called the police, filed a report, gave coordinates. A week later, they got back to us, said the land was empty. No buildings, no cabins, just trees. Like nothing had ever been built there. Rachel doesn't talk about it anymore. She says it was probably a temporary setup, like one of those weird cultish retreats that pack up and vanish when they sense trouble. But sometimes, when I'm trying to sleep, I remember Lena's eyes. And I wonder how many other people went there and never left. I wonder what kind of retreat needs to erase its own existence. And most of all, I wonder what they were trying to teach us. I was working the late shift when it happened, just another Tuesday night. I'd taken on some extra delivery hours, trying to stack up enough cash to finally move out of my crappy apartment and maybe upgrade from my rusted-out sedan. The area wasn't bad, just quiet. Too quiet sometimes. That night, my last drop-off was in a weird part of town, industrial zone, mostly storage units and empty lots. It was close to midnight when I pulled up. The house looked abandoned, but the order had been prepaid. I left the food on the porch like the notes said, and turned back toward my car. That's when I heard it. It wasn't a scream, more like a grunt. A wet, low, ugly sound like someone choking on something. I looked across the street and saw two silhouettes near one of the old warehouses. One of them staggered back, then hit the ground. At first, I thought it was a fight. Then I saw the glint of something long and sharp in the other man's hand. He wasn't just hitting him. He was stabbing him. Over and over. I froze. The killer didn't notice me. He was too focused, too intense. I dropped behind my car, heart pounding, trying not to breathe too loud. I fumbled for my phone, called 911, whispered what I saw, and then got the hell out of there. Didn't wait for the cops. Didn't even finish the report. Just drove. I spent the whole ride back convincing myself it wasn't what I thought. Maybe it was staged. Maybe it was a drug thing. Maybe I saw it wrong. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I checked the local news. Nothing. By that evening, one article popped up. Unidentified male found dead near warehouse district. Possible overdose. Overdose. That's when I knew something was off. There was no way what I saw was an accident or some drugged-out collapse. That guy had been murdered. I watched it happen. 2 days later, I saw the car for the first time. A dark blue Lincoln parked across the street from my building. Engine off. Windows tinted. Just sitting there. I didn't think much of it until it was there again the next night. And again. Always in a different spot, always just out of view. But never far. One night, I decided to walk past it, real slow, pretending to be on a call. I glanced at the driver's seat. Empty. The next morning, I came home from work and found my apartment door slightly open. I'd locked it. I was sure I had. I stood in the hallway for a full minute, keys in hand, listening. Nothing. When I finally stepped in, the lights were off. My laptop was still there. My wallet, keys untouched. But sitting on my kitchen table was a single slip of paper. No envelope, no handwriting I recognized. Just one sentence printed. You saw what you weren't supposed to. I backed out and left immediately. Spent the night at a cheap motel across town. Called the cops the next morning, told them about the break-in. When they showed up, nothing was missing. No signs of forced entry. They acted like I'd imagined the whole thing. But they took the note. I never saw it again. I tried to go back to normal after that. What else could I do? The cops didn't believe me, and moving somewhere else wasn't exactly in the budget. I told myself I was being paranoid, that the note was just some random prank, maybe from someone who saw me near the scene that night. But deep down, I knew it wasn't random. A few nights later, I was finishing another delivery run when I noticed the car again. Same model, same tinted windows, but this time it was following me. Not close enough to spook a normal driver, but just close enough that I knew it wasn't a coincidence. I pulled into a gas station to see if they'd keep going. They didn't. The car stopped down the street, idling, headlights off. I ran inside, told the clerk I was being followed, asked if I could hang back for a few minutes. He just shrugged and said, "There's a camera out front." I stayed for almost an hour. When I finally stepped back outside, the car was gone. But the next morning, my phone was wiped. All of it, texts, photos, contacts, apps. Just gone. Like someone had factory reset it. I hadn't downloaded anything, hadn't clicked on any links. Nothing. I called the carrier. They had no explanation. Said it wasn't even showing as remotely accessed. That's when I realized this wasn't just about intimidation. Whoever these people were, they were connected. They weren't some random gang. They had reach, influence, maybe even inside law enforcement. I tried to file a follow-up report with the local PD. Gave them everything, the car model, the note, the suspicious overdose case. The officer typed into his system, looked confused, and told me the case file didn't exist. I gave him the name of the victim from the article. He shook his head. There's no one by that name in our records. I went home, locked all the doors, and finally did the only thing I could think of. I recorded everything. Sat down in front of my webcam and just talked. For over an hour, I laid it all out, what I saw, the car, the note, the cops, the vanishing case, the break-in, everything. Then I posted it on every platform I could think of. Reddit, YouTube, Twitter, backup copies on encrypted drives. I knew once it was out there, I couldn't take it back. But I also knew if I waited any longer, something worse was going to happen. The next morning, the video had thousands of views. Then tens of thousands. People started commenting, sharing. Some of them told stories just like mine. Different cities, different details, same feeling. Like they'd seen something they weren't supposed to, and someone had tried to erase it. By noon, my apartment door had been kicked in. I wasn't there. I'd already left. No credit cards. No phone. Just cash, a backpack, and a burner email I check maybe once a month now, just to see if the video's still up. It is. No one's ever taken it down. And no one's ever found me either.